dead body washes up on a Spanish beach in 1943, clutching a briefcase full of top-secret Allied invasion plans. The Spanish find it, the Germans get word, and Hitler moves entire divisions based on those documents. There's just one problem. The whole thing was a setup. The body, the documents, everything was fake. This is Operation Mincemeat, and it's one of the most brilliant and bizarre spy operations in history. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to The Grim Speaker. Before we dive into today's incredible story, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell so you never miss these mind-blowing history videos. All right, so imagine you're a British intelligence officer in 1943, and your boss asks you to come up with a plan to fool Hitler about where the Allies will invade next. Your solution? Find a dead body, give it a fake identity, plant false documents on it, and float it to the coast of Spain. If that sounds insane, well, that's because it kind of was, but it worked. Operation Mincemeat is the story of how British intelligence used a corpse to sell the biggest lie of World War II. It involved fake love letters, a detailed backstory for a man who never existed, and a chain of events that would ultimately save thousands of lives during the Allied invasion of Sicily. This operation was so successful that historians still debate exactly how much it influenced German strategy. Let's dive into this absolutely wild tale of wartime deception. The problem. By early 1943, the Allies had a problem. They'd pushed the Germans out of North Africa and needed their next move. The logical target was Sicily, the Italian island that sits right at the toe of Italy's boot. Taking Sicily would give the Allies a stepping stone into mainland Europe and knock Italy out of the war. But here's the thing. It was obvious. Anyone looking at a map could figure out that Sicily made sense as the next target. And if the Germans figured it out too, they'd reinforce the island and turn it into a fortress. The invasion would cost thousands of Allied lives. The Allies needed the Germans to think they were going somewhere else, anywhere else. They needed a deception so convincing that Hitler would move troops away from Sicily to defend against invasions that weren't coming. This is where British intelligence got creative. Actually, creative doesn't quite cover it. They got weird. The plan takes shape. The idea came from Flight Lieutenant Charles Cholmondeley and Lieutenant Commander Ewan Montague, two officers working for British naval intelligence. They'd been brainstorming deception ideas when Cholmondeley suggested something that sounded like it came from a spy novel. What if they planted fake invasion plans on a dead body and made it look like an officer had drowned in an airplane crash? The concept was wild, but had a certain logic to it. Spain was officially neutral, but everyone knew they had close ties to Nazi Germany. Information from Spain routinely made its way to Berlin. If the British could get convincing fake documents to wash up on the Spanish coast, there was a good chance the Germans would see them. But pulling this off required incredible attention to detail. It wasn't enough to just dump a body with some papers. They needed to create an entire person, a life story so convincing that even trained intelligence officers would believe it. The Germans would scrutinize every detail. One mistake, and the whole operation would fall apart. The plan got approval from the top. Winston Churchill himself was briefed on it. The team got the green light to proceed with what would become one of the strangest operations in intelligence history. First problem. They needed a body. This is where things get a bit dark, but this is war we're talking about. They needed a corpse that could plausibly have been in the water for several days. It had to be a man of military age, in reasonably good condition, with no obvious signs that he died from anything other than drowning. These weren't easy requirements to meet. The team worked with a coroner who helped them find a suitable body. The man they selected was Glyndwr Michael, a homeless man from Wales who had died from eating rat poison containing phosphorus. The cause of death was important because drowning doesn't leave many obvious signs, and the body needed to pass a Spanish autopsy. This raises ethical questions that still make people uncomfortable today. They were using a real person's body without family consent. The team justified it as a way to save thousands of lives, but it's still a morally gray area. Glyndwr Michael would posthumously play one of the most important roles in the war, but he never knew it and never had a choice. Now came the creative part, building a person from scratch. They named him Major William Martin of the Royal Marines. They created an entire life for him. He got an identity card, military passes, a driver's license, receipts, ticket stubs, basically all the pocket litter that a real person would carry. But the team went much further. They gave Major Martin a personality. He had a fiancée named Pam. They wrote love letters between them, intimate and believable letters that showed a real relationship. They included a photograph of Pam, who was actually an MI5 clerk who agreed to pose for the picture. The letters were brilliant. They weren't overly dramatic or obviously planted. They were mundane, sweet, slightly awkward, exactly what you'd expect from a young couple separated by war. One letter from Pam mentioned their engagement and how she couldn't wait for him to return. Another mentioned everyday details about rationing and life in London. They gave Martin debt. He had letters from his bank about an overdraft and from a jeweler about a bill for Pam's engagement ring. Real people have financial problems. So Major Martin did too. They even gave him hobbies. His pockets contained ticket stubs from a London theater show. He had a bill from a gentleman's club. Every detail added to the picture of a real, three-dimensional person. The briefcase was the key element. It contained 2 letters that appeared to be correspondence between senior Allied officers. One letter from Lieutenant General Sir Archibald Nye to General Harold Alexander mentioned the upcoming invasion of Greece and Sardinia, with Sicily as a feint to distract the Germans. The letter was written in a casual, conversational tone between colleagues, not in a way that screamed official invasion plan. On April 30th, 1943, the submarine HMS Seraph surfaced off the coast of Huelva, Spain, in the middle of the night. The crew brought Major Martin's body on deck. He was wearing a full Royal Marine uniform and Mae West life jacket. The briefcase was chained to his wrist. The crew read a brief prayer, then slid the body into the water. The currents would carry it to shore, where it would hopefully be found quickly enough that the documents would still be intact. Then they waited. The operation was now out of British hands. They'd done everything they could. The body was in the water, the documents were planted, and all they could do was hope the Spanish and Germans would take the bait. The body washed ashore near Huelva a few hours later, just as planned. A local fisherman found it and reported it to Spanish authorities. This is where things got interesting. The Spanish conducted an autopsy and officially ruled the death as drowning. They notified the British consul that they'd found the body of a British officer. But before turning over the body and effects, the Spanish intelligence service photographed everything, including the contents of the briefcase. Those photographs, as the British had anticipated, made their way to German intelligence. The Abwehr, Germany's military intelligence service, analyzed everything. They looked at the letters, the personal effects, the details of Major Martin's life. Back in London, the British were monitoring German communications through Ultra, their code-breaking operation at Bletchley Park. They could read encrypted German messages and see the enemy's reactions in real time. The Germans bought it. Hook, line, and sinker. German intelligence concluded that the documents were genuine. They believed Major Martin was a real officer who died in an air crash, and that the invasion plans he carried were authentic. The intelligence made its way up the German chain of command, eventually reaching Hitler himself. The Führer became convinced that the Allies would invade Greece and Sardinia, not Sicily. Hitler moved troops. He reinforced Greece and Sardinia. He sent Rommel, one of his best generals, to Greece. He moved air squadrons. He adjusted naval deployments, all based on information from a dead, homeless man who'd been transformed into a fictional British officer. The British knew it was working when they intercepted German messages referring to the intelligence from Spain. One message said the documents were so important that they'd been shown to the Führer. Another discussed troop movements to defend against the expected invasions of Greece and Sardinia. In London, the team behind Operation Mincemeat must have been thrilled and probably a bit amazed that it had actually worked. When the Allies invaded Sicily on July 10, 1943, they met lighter resistance than expected. The Germans had moved significant forces away from the island, convinced the real attack would come elsewhere. The invasion wasn't easy. Soldiers still fought and died. But the deception had worked. German defensive forces on Sicily were weaker than they would have been if Hitler had correctly guessed Allied intentions. Historians estimate that Operation Mincemeat may have saved thousands of Allied lives by reducing German resistance during the Sicily landings. It's impossible to know exact numbers, but the strategic impact was real and measurable. The operation also had a longer-term effect. It made Hitler more paranoid about Allied intentions. Later in the war, when the Allies ran deception operations around D-Day, the Germans were more likely to believe false intelligence because they'd been fooled before. Operation Mincemeat remained classified for years after the war ended. The full story came out in 1953 when Ewan Montague published a book called The Man Who Never Was. The book was a bestseller and was later adapted into a movie. But even Montague's book didn't reveal everything. For decades, the true identity of the body remained secret. The British government didn't want to publicize that they'd used someone's corpse without permission. It wasn't until the 1990s that historians definitively identified the body as Glinder Michael. The revelation sparked debate about the ethics of the operation. Was it right to use someone's body this way, even to save lives in wartime? There's no easy answer. The operation clearly served a greater good, but it also involved using a person who had no say in the matter. In 1998, the Commonwealth War Graves Commission added an inscription to the grave in Spain, where Major Martin, Glinder Michael, is buried. It acknowledges both the false identity and the real man beneath it. Operation Mincemeat became the gold standard for deception operations. It showed that with enough attention to detail, you could sell a complete fiction to enemy intelligence services. The operation's success came from understanding how intelligence works. The Germans didn't just accept information at face value. They analyzed it, looked for inconsistencies, checked details. The British knew this, so they made sure every detail of Major Martin's life would hold up to scrutiny. The personal touches were crucial. The love letters, the debt, the theater tickets, all these human details made Major Martin real. German analysts weren't just looking at military documents. They were looking at a person's life, and everything they saw confirmed the story. Modern intelligence services still study Operation Mincemeat as an example of effective deception. The principles remain relevant even in the digital age. Create a believable cover story, support it with detailed evidence, and understand your enemy's intelligence-gathering methods well enough to feed them information through channels they trust. Operation Mincemeat is one of those historical events that seems too crazy to be true, but every bit of it happened. A dead homeless man became a fictional Royal Marine major. Fake love letters and planted documents fooled Hitler. A corpse with a briefcase changed the course of the war. It's a story that shows how creative thinking and attention to detail can achieve what brute force cannot. The team behind Mincemeat didn't have armies or weapons. They had imagination, psychology, and an understanding of human nature. They knew that people believe stories that feel real, even when those stories are completely fabricated. Major William Martin never existed, but his impact on World War II was absolutely real. Glyndwr Michael, the man whose body made it all possible, finally got recognition decades later. Together, they represent one of the strangest and most successful intelligence operations in history. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, hit that like button and share this video with anyone who loves crazy historical stories. Drop a comment and let me know what other World War II operations you want to hear about. There are so many more wild stories to tell. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Remember, truth is stranger than fiction, especially in wartime.